You know how every big royal moment is wrapped in glamour, tradition, and that polished fairy tale vibe? But behind every glossy photograph, there's always a whisper, a shadow, something nobody wants to touch. And Meghan Markle's wedding? Oh, trust me, it had a shadow so big that even palace walls couldn't hide it. Because for years, people kept seeing the same thing and pretending they didn't see it. Why was Meghan's family practically invisible during the biggest day of her life? Why was her side of the chapel looking like someone forgot to send invitations? Everyone saw it. Insiders talked about it in low voices, shaking their heads. Commentators danced around the topic like it was radioactive. But publicly, a total suffocating silence. No explanations, no clarifications, nothing. Until now. Because apparently, Prince Harry, yes, that Harry, has finally whispered bits of the truth to people close to him. And what he shared wasn't some dramatic rant or flashy confession. It was quieter than that, almost like he was trying to unburden himself without actually opening Pandora's box. What he said hinted at something deeper, heavier, and way more complicated than people ever imagined. And when he finally hinted at the pressure behind those empty seats, the picture shifted. He didn't blame Meghan's family drama. He didn't blame logistics. Nope. What he hinted at was something so sensitive, even he didn't fully understand it until long after the wedding plans were already in motion. Because every clue, every hesitation, every missing relative pointed to the same chilling place. A blank space on Meghan's family tree. A blank space that acted more like a warning than a mistake. That's where everything begins. Before Meghan became the glamorous royal bride walking down the aisle in Windsor Castle, there was already a tiny detail hiding inside her family history. A detail so small you'd overlook it. Until you realized how powerful it really was. When Harry and Meghan's engagement was announced, the British press did what they always do. They printed Meghan's entire genealogical chart. It was supposed to look neat, respectable, traditional, predictable, except right where Doria Ragland's mother's name should be, there was absolutely nothing, just blank. A void. An empty space that should never, ever exist on a properly vetted family chart. It's like printing a fairy tale and leaving out the queen archivists and genealogists noticed immediately, because this wasn't just weird, it was impossible. A mother's name is the most basic detail when it's gone. That isn't an oversight, that's a message. But the weird part? This blank kept showing up in multiple records. Different sources, different formats, different documents, same missing name, every single one dodging the exact same question. Who was Doria's mother? Why couldn't anyone produce her name for decades? And what kind of secret was hidden so deep that it was safer to leave a blank line than reveal the truth? Because the more researchers looked, the more that empty space started looking like a shield or a warning. Or both. A warning that the story buried behind that missing name would eventually find its way right into Windsor Castle. And right into Meghan and Harry's wedding, Windsor Castle, May 2018. The whole world watched Meghan float down the aisle like she was born for that moment. Cameras flashed, choirs sang, and every headline screamed, modern fairy tale. But all that sparkle didn't distract from the one thing that stood out like a bruise. The entire left side of Meghan's family seating was empty. You could literally count the people on her side on one hand. There was only Doria Ragland, sitting alone, no sisters, no brothers, no cousins, no uncles or aunts, not even distant relatives desperate for royal freebies. Just one woman. Sitting directly across from the Queen of England, people in the royal household felt it instantly. Even the Queen reportedly noticed how strange the optics were. A royal wedding is supposed to symbolize two families becoming one. But here, one half of that picture was completely missing. And not by accident. Because royal weddings do not happen randomly. Every seat, every camera angle, every face present, everything is chosen with intention. And the idea that Meghan's entire bloodline suddenly evaporated on the day she married into the world's most scrutinized family? Absolutely not accidental. Sources involved in planning said the decision was calculated, deliberate, made out of fear. Fear that bringing too many relatives might lead to conversations, curiosity, whispers, or worse, revelations. That too much visibility might crack open a secret that had been buried for decades. A secret tied directly to that empty spot on her family tree. And then, 8 months after the wedding, just when the world had stopped obsessing over every detail and moved on, the missing name suddenly surfaced like a ghost finally stepping into the light. Doria Ragland's mother had a name after all. Her name was Janet Arnold, born September 4th, 1929 in Sandusky, Ohio. Died December 27th, 2000, age 71. On the surface, nothing shocking, just a simple correction. A puzzle piece finally found. But names? Names have power. Once you have a name, you can dig, you can uncover. You can connect dots that were never meant to meet. And the moment her name was revealed, records began popping open. Birth certificates, cemetery logs, county files. Suddenly, Janet's entire life was illuminated illuminated. But instead of solving the mystery, everything became murkier. Dates didn't match cleanly, names overlapped in places they shouldn't, and the family tree? It didn't branch. It twisted, tangled, doubled back on itself in a way that made researchers stop cold. Because when they traced Janet's parents, James T. Arnold and Nettie Mae Allen, everything looked normal at first. Two parents, ordinary backgrounds. But then they traced their parents, and that was the moment everything shattered because James T. Arnold's mother was listed as Gertrude Elizabeth Sadler, and Nettie Mae Allen's mother was also listed as Gertrude Elizabeth Sadler. The same woman, same birth year, same records, meaning James and Nettie Mae, Janet's parents, were half-siblings. Let that sink in. The mother of the bride's mother was the product of a direct incestuous union. The kind of scandal that absolutely cannot be associated with royalty. Not now, not then, not ever. The blank wasn't hiding nothing. It was hiding that. And once that truth reached the palace, the mood shifted instantly. Not anger, not disgust, something colder, calculated. They had a job to do. Contain it. Protect the monarchy's image. Shield the future Duchess from a humiliation that would have followed her and her children forever. And so, quietly and efficiently, the palace strategists went to work. Remove Janet's origins from official documents. Allow her name, but not her lineage. Keep Doria's extended family far from the spotlight. Keep the wedding guest list tiny. Less family equals fewer questions. Because the palace wasn't just avoiding gossip, they were avoiding an international storm. And honestly, Meghan and Doria felt that pressure too, Doria especially. She appears rarely, speaks even less, always controlled, always distant. Not because she's cold, but because silence, for her, might be survival. And Meghan? She kept her distance from her American relatives too, not out of hostility, but out of caution. As if reconnecting with them might reopen a wound she spent her whole life keeping closed. When the cameras panned across St. George's Chapel, the world saw beauty, love, history. But look closer, and the truth was hiding in plain sight, in those empty chairs behind Doria. Absence doesn't scream, it whispers. And those whispers carried nearly a century's worth of buried history. History involving Janet Arnold, James, Nettie Mae, and the grandmother who appeared twice in a family tree where she should have appeared once. And when Harry finally opened up, even in a quiet, hesitant way, he didn't say it was drama, or conflict, or estrangement. He said it was complicated, a weight heavy enough to leave whole rows empty, a secret powerful enough to shape the entire wedding, a blank space that was never blank at all. And here's the thing, no one ever wants to admit out loud. Secrets don't just sit quietly in the past. They echo, they travel, they slip into the room even when no one invites them. And Meghan's secret, this tangled, painful chapter of her maternal history, didn't just stay buried in century-old documents. It followed her into the biggest moment of her life. It sat there in the chapel, silent but screaming, in the form of those empty seats. Even if Meghan herself hadn't fully processed the magnitude of what her lineage held, the palace had Harry had. And once he understood, even he couldn't ignore the weight of it. You could almost imagine him hearing the explanations from advisors, clinical, emotionless, like reading out a test result nobody wants to see. Not blaming Meghan, not blaming Doria, but spelling out what the records suggested, a direct ancestral connection that would send shockwaves through global headlines if it ever became public. This wasn't some distant cousin scandal. This was closer, sharper, dangerous, at least in terms of public perception. The monarchy thrives on pristine optics, and this was the kind of story tabloids would turn into a roaring wildfire, the kind you can never outrun. So of course the palace responded the only way they knew how, by eliminating every possible crack where light could leak in. That blank on the genealogical chart, it stayed. That huge, haunting silence around Doria's extended family, it was reinforced. Her side of the chapel left almost untouched, almost ghostly. Better to have a row of empty seats than a row of unfamiliar faces stirring curiosity. Better for the world to wonder than to know. And yet, silence has a way of speaking louder than anything. Because when Doria sat there, dignified and alone, she wasn't just representing herself, she was carrying generations of complicated history, trauma, and silence on her shoulders. A woman who learned long ago that keeping distance wasn't coldness, it was protection. She kept her life small, private, carefully controlled, not because she didn't love her daughter, but because she knew the weight of what lay behind her. People often misinterpret that. They say, why didn't more family come? Why didn't cousins show up? Why didn't Meghan bring them? As if the answer could ever be simple. Meghan wasn't just avoiding drama, she was shielding a story she didn't ask for, a story she inherited without consent, a story that shaped her mother's life, and by extension, her own. And as for the palace, they weren't trying to erase her past out of cruelty, they were terrified of it. Every monarchy survives on image, on spotless lineage, on the belief that everything about the royal household is elevated, refined, beyond scandal. And this gritty, painful, deeply human truth didn't fit in their frame. Behind closed doors, conversations weren't emotional, they were strategic. Advisors didn't gasp or clutch their pearls. They outlined potential headlines. They analyzed public reaction. They considered long-term consequences for the monarchy, for Harry, for future royal children. The conclusion was obvious. This part of Meghan's history could never be spotlighted, so they built walls around it. They protected Meghan the only way they knew how, silently, invisibly, without ever acknowledging why. But silence, ironically, made everything louder, because when the world looked at that wedding, they didn't see the palace's careful strategy. They saw the emptiness. They saw the lone mother. They saw a woman marrying into centuries of dynasty with no visible family behind her. And that image, raw, stark, haunting, became one of the defining pictures of the day, and Harry felt that too. Those who've spoken to him say he still struggles with it, that it hurts him more than he admits, that he understands now why Meghan's side was so empty. But understanding doesn't make it easier. He didn't describe bitterness or anger when he spoke about it, only the heaviness of knowing the truth, of realizing that the woman he loves carries a piece of family history so complicated, even she had to walk into her wedding surrounded by absence, and the saddest part, none of it was Meghan's fault, or Doria's. They didn't choose their ancestry. They didn't shape the mistakes of past generations, but they inherited the consequences, the silence, the distance. And the world saw only the surface, never the wound underneath. Because that blank space on the genealogy chart was never just a blank, it was a secret, a scar, a warning. And that warning reached all the way to Windsor and sat itself down in those empty seats. Even now, after all these years, the question still lingers like a whisper nobody wants to answer. If this one secret stayed hidden for nearly a century, what else might still be buried in the parts of this story the world hasn't uncovered yet?